All right. I'd like to call the regular trustee meeting for Monday, April 13th, 2020 at 5:00 p.m. First, we would like to do a pledge of allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United
United
States
States
of
of America
and
and
to
the
the
republic
which it stands,
stands
one
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty
and justice for all. Thank you. We have an agenda, and there has been 2 additions.
Yes.
Any
Board.
other correct?
Yeah, board. I just point out for everyone watching, we're adding under road department paving agreement, and under the fiscal officer furniture purchase request.
Okay. Hearing no other changes or amendments to the agenda, like a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve or accept the general ledger report in the amount of $379,282.13 for the March 11, 2020 payroll.
I second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
I move to accept the general ledger report in the amount of $399,801.39 for the 3/25/20 payroll.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Make a motion to accept the general ledger report in the amount of $365,750.59 for the April 8, 2020 payroll.
I second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
I move to make a motion to accept the payment listing report in the amount of $618,228.88 for warrant through 3/31/2020.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the April 1, 2020 special trustee meeting as presented.
I second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes. And before we go into the next portion of our agenda, I would like to comment to Fiscal Officer Ryan Rushing that I thank you for the first time I've seen the minutes of our most recent meeting on the next meeting's agenda. And I appreciate the fact that you did the minutes so quickly and we were able to read them as part of our package and also comment on them and approve them today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Wallace.
Are there any citizens that are desiring to speak?
Board. Board, 1 second. We'll have to come to that at the end. I apologize. We are having just a little technical difficulty on that. So I'll work on that during the meeting, and then we'll come back to that if that's okay.
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Is there any old business to discuss? Hearing none. Any new business to discuss? Hearing none. Greene County Sheriff's Office biweekly activity report.
Thank you, Board. In your packet on page 17 begins the biweekly report. Pretty lengthy one. This covers the meeting that was canceled due to the COVID-19 March meeting. So that takes that 2-week period, and then on top of that, the last 2 weeks leading up to this meeting. And then followed by on page 60 is your monthly report from the sheriff's office. Are there any questions?
I had no question.
Yeah, just go ahead.
But I did want to compliment the sheriff's office that they have really increased the activity and make sure the citizens are aware that the sheriff's office has been patrolling our businesses, and extra patrols almost have doubled in the last month. And we appreciate their work and their endeavors to keep us safe.
Question I had, Alex, do we have, just want to make sure that we have adequate personal protection equipment for our deputies that are assigned to the township?
Yes, we do. We have plenty.
Okay. And from a standpoint at this point yet, do we have any of the deputies that are assigned to the township that have either tested positive or have any known contact with any COVID patient?
There have been on the Xenia office, but none in the Beavercreek substation.
Good. Okay. Whatever we can do to help protect them as we would protect our firefighters and paramedics. So.
Yep. Thank you, board.
Otherwise, questions.
All right, thank you, board. Next item is on page 71 of your packet. It begins the HR biweekly report. Are there any questions?
No questions for me.
I had none.
No, I had none. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, board. First item under the Community Development and Risk Department is on page 74. We have an application for an appointment for the Zoning Commission. This was on the last agenda. Obviously, that meeting was canceled, so we moved it forward to here. In your packet is the application plus a resume for Mr. Brown. And I have a resolution on page 81 of your packet, and if you just want to make a motion as presented.
I guess first I'd like to thank Mr. Brown for stepping up to be a volunteer on this board. So we obviously need people that are willing to give their time and their resources, and he brings one heck of a resume, obviously, to the township. So I think we're blessed to have somebody with his background and willingness to donate his time. So I'll make a motion to approve a resolution to appoint Jeffrey Brown to alternate board member on the Zoning Commission as presented.
I second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
and Trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
Thank you, board. Next item is on page 83 of your packet is the biweekly report for the Community and Development and Risk Department. I will point out that your next biweekly report will include the new levies, the fire levy, as well as the school levy. We have been working with the county auditor. Obviously, it's been limited since his office hours have been limited with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we will have an updated one next trustee meeting, which will be the April 27th meeting. Are there any questions?
I had no questions.
No questions.
I had one question. There was a note regarding some discussion with Valley Springs and state of Ohio.
Yep, Max, if you want to turn your mic on, you can answer that question.
Sure. I'm sorry. All I heard was that there was a note about Valley Springs.
Yeah, if you could, Max, if you could just give us a little bit of update as far as what's going on there with state of Ohio. Are they looking to make it a super state?
Yeah. So what happens is Jobs Ohio does site selection searches. They feed them to Dayton Development Coalition, who then turns around and sends them to all of us local economic development organizations. We then look at these requests for information for potential sites to locate certain businesses. Usually they're codenamed. This one was called Lead Match, Project Lead Match. So we've been trying to fill out this request for information to get this site chosen or in the running rather as a site for this international business. It's they're looking to create a 1 million square foot battery factory essentially. So we looked at part of Valley Springs Farm as a potential site for that search. And in doing that, we were working with the McGinnises to put that site on a website called Zoom Prospector, which is the first step in submitting these kinds of sites through the state. And that entailed just gathering some information about the site, its electric capacity, other utility capacity, some demographic information on workforce and things like that. We'll be turning that all in probably the 19th. We're waiting to get some workforce information back from the DDC on the RFI. And we have a shot, although realistically, our workforce will be a challenge in securing a site like this. So just want to temper expectations. But yeah, that's what we're doing is we're trying to submit this site for a statewide site search.
Great. Thanks for the background. And you may be aware of it. So in Jeffersonville, Ohio, there's a 3,000 acre soybean farm that the state of Ohio has an option on 1,500 acres, and that's what they call a super site. And so you might have a discussion at some point with the McGinnises as far as the state of Ohio has that program where they'll come in and they'll purchase an option on a portion of the land, and then they'll keep that in a bank it has a higher ranking score when it comes to offering that to be it manufacturers or office or whatever the use might be. So,
okay, yeah, I will look into the super site designation.
Yep.
Thank you.
They have the acreage, that's why I bring it up. So a smaller site would not have the acreage. So, okay.
All right.
Good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Otherwise, I have no other questions.
Okay. Thank you, board. Next item is.
As far as permits, I don't know if you're going to stay on that or not, but when we look at the single family permit process right now, where are we at with regards to year over year or through March? I would assume that we're going to take a significant decrease here.
Yeah, that is what we're looking at is a decrease. You'll have to forgive me. Ed prepared that report, and so he would have a little bit more information on the kind of analysis of those numbers. I've been kind of working a little bit more on some processes in the zoning office and some special projects. So I don't have as much information as I'd like on that.
No problem. It might be interesting to monitor at least for the next probably 4 to 6 months as far as our year over year. So year to date versus a year ago year to date, and keep an eye on that. Several of the big banks have announced today that mortgage rates are going to go up because of concerns over foreclosures. And so as that begins to trickle up, then obviously the whole housing market is impacted. So just be curious. We stay in touch with our builders, and we've got enough developments going on right now. And it's not just from a township planning standpoint, but also schools are relying on our data that we're feeding to them. So,
Mr. Kress,
yeah,
Mr. Kress, this is
appreciate it.
Randy, and we'll be checking with Ed on that, definitely.
Thank you.
And just to let the board know, and I know you know this, but let the general public know, we're still processing permits. So we're doing it either online or we have a box in front of the office. Now it will, because of the virus, it will sit for 4 days, and then we'll sanitize the outside and then open it up and process the permits. So whether it's a housing permit or any other type of permit, we're continuing to work on that.
Yeah, and it would be great if this all rebounds back quickly, and I think everybody's hopeful for that, but we have multiple levies that are based on continued growth.
We'll look into that. board. Next item is on page 91 of your packet is the biweekly report for the IT department. Obviously, we've seen an increase in tickets compared to previous years, just as we prepared for teleworking and getting some of the programs and softwares in place so that we can continue to do business. I shouldn't say as usual, but the best as we can do during this distancing and shelter in place. Are there any questions?
I have none.
No question for me.
Just kudos for keeping everybody connected and working remote.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, board. Next item is the addition. It's that time of year. We did receive from the Greene County engineer the paving agreement. We do have a sample resolution here, but since we talked to the engineer's office about not being able to collect signatures, so they're okay with you approving me, the authorizing to sign it this year. We do have the breakdown. I just want to point out that we do have a bike path that we're doing, and that's working with one of our homeowners associations, and that is Hunters Point. So we added their request to our bidding list, and we're going to be working on an agreement with them for obviously reimbursing the township. The homeowners association originally, when they looked at repaving the bike path that they're responsible for, was about $30,000. And the bids came back for their project at $16,000. So much like we do with Country Club of the North, we're doing the same thing with Hunters Point for their section of the bike path. So you'll see that where it says US 35 project of bike path, we're going to be taking some money from there. And then once we get reimbursed, it'll go back into that line item. I do have two motions here that I sent to you. One is to approve the 2020 collective bid agreement and authorize me to sign, and then the purchase request number for the actual paving equipment project. Are there any questions?
No.
I make a motion to approve the 2020 collective bid agreement with Greene County engineer as presented and authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
Trustee Dean,
Yeah.
trustee Kretz,
Yes.
trustee Wallace.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve purchase request 10724 to John R. Jurgensen for annual paving in an amount not to exceed $180,000 and authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yeah.
trustee Dean,
Yeah.
and trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
Thank you, board. Next item is on page 94 of your packet is the biweekly report for the road department. Are there any questions?
I have no question.
I had none.
Did we get our last shipment of salt in? I know we were going to fill the barn.
Tim's on here. If he unmute his mic. Go ahead, Tim.
Yes, what we did is use the balance of the PO we had open from 2019 and filled what we could of the barn. I'm hopeful with this winter, prices are going to go down. So we have plenty to get started or finish this year. So we should be in good shape.
Good.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay.
Thank you, board. Next
No other
item.
questions.
Okay. Thank you, board. Next item is on page 95 of your packet. Is a purchase request under the fire department to purchase bariatric transport equipment. Budget justification starts on page 95 with a motion on page 96. Chief Annabos is on here to answer any questions.
I would like Chief Vanderbroek to explain to the public what bariatric equipment is used, what it's used for, and who would use it.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to see you tonight. The bariatric unit is designed for transporting patients who are heavier or larger than the average person that we would transport. So typically it means that the equipment is supersized for width, length, and weight capacity. Typically what we've done in the past is had a single unit designated for bariatric transport, which has provided or caused some challenges. One, we have to keep an additional unit on the road that's not staffed all the time. And then we do have to provide staff for it when it's needed. And what we found is that the cost of maintaining that unit and the complexity of dealing with the staffing can be taken care of by essentially outfitting all of our frontline medics with the capability of transporting bariatric patients. In addition, generally speaking, the population is getting larger. And so the ability to transport larger patients, even without having to go to the full extreme of a bariatric unit, is going to be helpful for a number of the folks that we transport. So this makes all of our units bariatric compatible and provides for the capacity to transport larger patients, even without that additional. So that's what we're looking to do.
Thank you. I think that was good. Any other questions? And I'll accept the motion.
And if I recall correctly, I believe there's two motions for this one.
Correct, there are two motions, one for the cot loading system, and then the other was for the retrofit kits, 4 of them.
I'll make a motion to approve the purchase request 10511 to TransSafe for one bariatric cot loading system in the amount of $7,570 and authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
I second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
trustee Kretz,
Yes.
trustee Wallace.
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the purchase request 10512 to Stryker Medical for 4 medical cot retrofit kits in the amount of $8,716 and authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second with a clarification, $8,716.60.
I'm sorry.
You're
Yes.
fine.
$8,716.60.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
trustee Dean,
Yes.
trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Thank you, board. Next item is on page 96, is request to purchase winter coats for our staff with a motion on page 98, and Chief Vanderbos is here to answer any questions.
I had no questions.
I had no questions. My questions were answered in the brief. I appreciate it. The one I was going to ask was going to be lead time, and it said 3 to 4 months. You always wonder why you're ordering winter coats in the springs.
Yes, sir.
And maybe they're on sale. I didn't. I'll make a motion to approve purchase request 10514 to Phoenix Safety Outfitters for up 90 winter coats with liners in the amount not to exceed $32,430 and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
trustee Kretz,
Yes.
and trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Thank you, board. Next is to modify the personal deployment policy. This is related to the COVID-19. I discussed a little bit about this at the special meeting on April 1st, about having some contingencies in place. Chief Vanderbos is here to discuss the policy if you have any questions, and a simple motion just adopting it will be fine.
Chief, if you can explain why.
Yes, sir. So general deployment matrix that we have. We call it the matrix on the fire department that describes the where the staffing will be at each of the different levels, all the way down to we have down to a minimum of a crew size of 2. That's designed around handling the generic everyday how we operate with all the essentially I apologize, I'm about to repeat myself. It's a generic template for us to follow all the way down. What we're finding is that as we're planning specifically for COVID, and we experienced it a little bit with the tornado, and that's why this is kind of designed with those 2 types of scenarios in mind, is that we need some flexibility to be able to adopt to, for example, maybe one of our shifts is depleted due to illness where the other 2 shifts are not as affected. And so making a wholesale change to the deployment matrix doesn't make sense. And the timeliness of coming to the board, getting it approved to go back to implement it doesn't give us the flexibility timing wise, especially if we realize either a surge or an immediate catastrophic thing like the tornadoes last year. So what this is looking for is the flexibility for either declared emergencies or catastrophic events like the tornado for us to be able to make those changes on a temporary basis to address the needs to ensure that service is being delivered at the same level that we always deliver it. And then as soon as the situation normalizes, be able to come back to our original staffing matrix, because that is still the foundation that we want to operate off of. All we're looking for is the ability to flex when the situations aren't ideal like it was planned around.
Sure.
Thank you, Chief.
I move to adopt the personal deployment as presented.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Do we need to, Alex, do we need to specify version 6? The SOG 500.001 version 6?
You can add that, yes.
Okay. Second.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.
Thank you, Board. I'll turn it over to the chief to talk about the COVID-19 impact that we've seen on at least the fire department side.
So fortunately, the impact has been relatively minor for us so far. I've got a lot of information there. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to delve into. Probably the key points for us is right now, our calls for service volume is actually down from year over year by about 7%, which is pretty sizable. We attribute that to the fact that most folks are staying home and not getting into as much trouble as they normally would. When we listen to the experts, we're still expecting a surge within the week. April 19th was the original peak day that we were anticipating. We still don't seem to be building to that. So either the flattening of the curve has worked really well, or it's being drawn out further into the future. We're not sure which, obviously, yet. So we are planning for that. We have 3 significant contingencies I outlined for you. One is the personal protection equipment contingency. That we have fully enacted. We're doing every piece of that because that right now is our bottleneck. And so we're making sure that the crews are minimizing to the effect that they safely can the amount of PPE that's being used. We're recycling or cleaning and reusing where we can. We've used alternative methods of PPE. So all of those pieces are in place to ensure that if we do hit the surge or things get really bad, that we have sufficient surplus to be able to handle that. So we're set pretty well for that. The staffing depletion and the calls for service surge, I would anticipate that in a worst case scenario, we would probably have a combination of some sort of both of those fairly simultaneous. And so it's designed for us to be able to implement pieces or parts of both or the entirety of both of those strategies as necessary. But right now we're cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to go through with fairly little disruption to our normal service. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have specifically, but and I'll be happy to keep you up to date. Oh, the current count as of today is 11 known isolated or quarantined residences in Beavercreek and 7 that had been prior prior under those orders have come off the list, but 11 is the daily current total.
I have a question. When we transport, if we were to transport a patient that was suspected of COVID or known COVID, when we get to the area hospitals that we go to, so are they separating at the delivery point, essentially where we take a patient to, so that if you have a known COVID, you go one direction. If you have a broken arm with no COVID, you go a different direction?
Essentially, yes. Each facility is a little different based off their physical makeup. But if we have a suspected case, we are required to report ahead of time, and the crews are given special instructions at that point on where to take the patient and how to bring them in and all of that. As well as then we have obviously special decontamination procedures that we do above and beyond our normal if that were to be the case. So, but each facility is just a little different.
Okay. And is at the hospital or the point of delivery, is there a decontamination station for our people there, or do they have to wait until they come back?
Yeah, the units are completely deconned at the hospital before they come back. This is one of those things where COVID is a special case because of the magnitude of the impact, but it's a fairly general case as far as our ability and normal operations for dealing with contaminated spaces and biohazards. So it's not uncommon for us to have other types of communicable diseases that have to be deconned out, or biohazards with unknown potential diseases that have to be cleaned out. So the hospitals are set up for that. Our crews are set up and trained for that. And that all happens at the facility. So we never bring a dirty medic back. I probably should never say never, but it's very rare that we would bring a dirty medic back for any reason, even before COVID. COVID's just a special case in that.
Okay. And with regards to PPE for our staff and our people, are we replenishing on a regular basis what we're depleting, or are we unable to source?
A little bit of both. So we're replenishing what we can. We don't qualify at this point. Most of the federal and state level stockpiles are for imminent need, people who are completely out, and we are not there. We were well stocked before this because our EMS inventory folks do a really good job of staying ahead of the curve. We'll probably bolster that in the future based off some lessons learned, but we have not gotten to the point where we're depleted on anything, and the ability to recycle, especially we don't recycle gloves, but we have a very good supply of gloves, and the ability to recycle the N95 masks is going to be a little bit of a game changer, because that was one of the things that we were most likely to run into an issue with. And now with the Battelle cleaning process, we're able to basically extend the life of those 20 times over. So, and we have a system where about a third of our stock, as soon as we've used about a third of our stock, it'll go out for reconditioning at Battelle. And then by the time it makes it back, we'll likely have the next bit. So we're going in thirds with that to have a 2/3 reserve here for use in between. So yes, PPE, we seem to be said very well.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the biweekly activity report?
I just want to confirm there's 11 current that are being.
It's 11 residences. It's more people than that. So it's 11 addresses essentially.
Okay.
So some of those are single and some are family. It varies. But there are 11 that are currently under either an isolation or a quarantine order from public health. And there were 7 others that have now come off of that order. So they've either had it and recuperated or been cleared through testing to be known not to have it. But yes, as of today, it's 11.
So a total of 18, 7 recovered.
Correct.
Any other questions to the chief?
No, thank you.
Keep safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. That's all I have.
Our legal advisor, any comments?
Nothing at this time.
Our fiscal officer, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Board. I do have a purchase request, but before I get to that, I do want to brief the board on the activity of the fiscal office since our special meeting. A couple of items I do want to go over on a positive note, and thank you to the board for your support in this. We were able to secure an additional temp through Robert Half Account Temps. This temp actually started today. Her name is Kathy Schneider. Ms. Schneider has a CPA, is a practicing CPA, and has an extensive background in fund accounting. We were very fortunate to be able to work with Robert Half to finalize a candidate that I was looking for to assist our needs, especially in light of the transition to a new accounting software that will take some redundancy in terms of getting the data into that software. Ms. Schneider started this morning. She is going to be assisting, as I mentioned, with the implementation of our software. She does have experience with implementation of new accounting software. Her most recent assignment was with the YWCA in downtown Dayton, but she also has experience with the Springfield Metropolitan Housing Authority. It does have knowledge within fund accounting. Robert Half is going through what many entities are going through in light of this pandemic. They're shifting focuses on trying to get more career professionals, what they call their salary professional division, into different organizations. By doing this, it allows the, in this case, Beavercreek Township, the luxury of having a dedicated person for a set amount of time. Many entities that are utilizing Robert Half have kept their temps longer than they originally thought of due to most entities having hiring freezes during this time. So I do want to thank the board in supporting that. With having this caliber of a temp, I do not foresee adding an additional temp. I believe that with the resources the office has with Ms. Schultz, the additional temp, and the current temp, as well as myself, will have the resources to be able to get the books in order, but also move to the implementation of the new SSI VIP software. In addition to that, I was able to contact and change signatories on all the township's accounts. Besides one, I have contacted Morgan Stanley. Last week, I emailed, called, and attached a letter to my email. I have not had a response back. It's my intention to follow up this week to do the same and to ensure that we have a smooth process in that regard. If I do not have any contact within this week, I do plan on sending a certified letter to the office that we have on file, but then to also reach out to central office at Morgan Stanley to expedite that process. Speaking of depositories and investments, we have started the process of switching the primary depository for the township from PNC Bank to Huntington as authorized by the board last meeting. We have initiated that with our contacts. Thank you to Trustee Kretz and the Investment Oversight Committee for leading that effort. As we transition with obviously many of their personnel working mobile, there may be a little bit more delay implementing that, but we are moving right along, getting the proper paperwork in order to achieve that. And the investment portion, I have also reached out, and thank you to Administrator Zahiriev as well, to reaching out to James Investment. We are also reviewing that paperwork and starting that transition to ensure that as things mature on our end, we're able to maintain the fully invested within our portfolio. I have made it a policy within the fiscal office that on a daily occurrence, we are taking the thumb drive that was previously used to back up the UAN network and putting it on a computer that is on the township server and network so that it's fully backed up to specifications just like any other township device. So we have, I created a file within the fiscal office's server, if you will, so that we have a continuous daily backup from that thumb drive from UAN to the township server, which, as you know, is backed up through the cloud and has a redundancy mechanism so that if in case we did lose the building or God forbid something else would occur, we would have backup from the previous day. I also drafted a letter and have in the process of stuffing and mailing that letter to all township vendors. As discussed in last meeting, this letter is to, one, introduce myself as the new fiscal officer and to ensure that our vendors and our partners are knowing our contact information for the fiscal office staff. In addition to that, on the letter, I did put in our email address of accounts payable at beavercreektownship.org to make sure that when invoices do go out, they're being redundantly sent to that email address as well, going away from a practice of having invoices maybe emailed to a specific email address for an employee. As we know, employees change over time, so having emails being sent to a specific email address, you can lose contact with that vendor. So having a generic accounts payable at beavercreektownship.org that has access to all fiscal office employees will reduce that opportunity so that the invoices are being receivably timed and payment accordingly. I am working, I do want to thank Jan Schultz. We are all working diligently to close fiscal year 2019. We are in the process of also completing the financial statements for 2019. I did speak to an accountant at Plattenberg CPA firm who is going to be quoting and assisting with the compilation and review of our financial statements as authorized by the board last meeting. What this will entail is Plattenberg CPA. They're a firm that has clients such as the city of Beavercreek as well as the city of Kettering, to name a couple. They will review our financial statements to ensure there are no material weaknesses and also to do various testing of the financial statements, reporting back to make sure that the numbers account as properly and that we're following GASB or the Government Accounting Standards Board and all of their pronouncements. With that, I do want to thank Tim Parks. This leads into my purchase request. Mr. Parks and his staff have been working diligently to make sure that the fiscal office space is adequate for our staffing needs. I can say by being in that office for just over a week, the office layout was never intended to maximize the space allotted. What I'm attempting to do is to ensure that as we grow and with staffing needs to continue to increase, we just have the compatible space in order to provide the employees their work areas to accomplish that. As you may recall, the fiscal office had a conference room, if you will. That conference room has been retrofitted into an office. That office will be where I'll be working, but it will also be utilized for when members of the public come in to assist with cemetery needs. There was a very old and dilapidated conference table in that room that was not according use of space. That has been removed, and we are working towards, and in your packet with the purchase request, working towards a new layout of the fiscal office. This new layout of the fiscal office will help encourage more of an open space and collaboration among the staff of the fiscal office. As you may recall in the job descriptions, my goal is to have cross-trained employees so that if one employee is absent on vacation or there's a vacancy, the work continues. So by also retrofitting the office to having that more open space feel, it will allow that collaboration. So with that, within your packet, there is a purchase request. In the purchase request, there are renderings of the office space that is being considered to be remodeled. Area 1 and 2 is the area as you immediately walk in looking ahead where one of our temps, Ms. Lori, sits currently. As of right now, that's quite a large space that's only being utilized by one employee. I do envision that to be able to house 2 employees, which would be the payroll specialist as well as the accounts payable specialist. So as you see in area 1 and 2, we're retrofitting that area to provide the furniture to fit that. Area 3 would be right as you enter into the fiscal office to the left. There used to be a little pigeon wall, if you will, that used to jut out next to a coat hanger. Thanks again to Mr. Parks and his staff. That has been removed and cleaned up to be able to house this current workstation. Area 3, I envision that workstation to be the assistant to the fiscal officer. And then finally, area 4, this would be where the conference room used to be. So as you walk into the right, this would house the desk for myself as fiscal officer. Although it's a yellow table in the rendering, it's not actually a yellow table. That's just to distinguish the 2 items. But as you see there, has a table to assist the public for cemetery needs and other items as may occur. So my staff will be able to use this office obviously throughout the entire work week. So although I would be there when I'm in office working, it'd be utilized for all public access for cemetery needs and other more confidential discussions of the fiscal office if staff need to occur in that. Following the renderings is a itemized quote of the service to put in the furniture. The quote does include not only the purchasing of the furniture, but a bulk of that cost is the full installation and labor and delivery of the actual furniture itself. Finally, there is a overhead view of the entire fiscal office with all 4 areas mapped out as described. And then there is a motion for a purchase request. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I have no questions, but I want to thank you, Mr. Rushing, for being able to remodel this space with your help with Mr. Parks and make it more efficient and cost effective for our township to have the work done maybe quicker and more collaborative with the other employees. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd also, I was going to say, I'd just like to thank Mr. Rushing. It's been a long time since the Board of Trustees has had to play defense. And I think it'll be appreciated by the entire board to be able to go on an offense mode for the township. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to thank also Mr. Zahariev. Currently right now, the temp is borrowing a office space in his side of the wing as we are working towards revamping the fiscal office. So Ms. Schneider, our additional temp that started this morning, is working on his side of the wing. So I do want to publicly thank Mr. Zahariev for that collaboration and working through this together. So thank you.
Thank you.
I agree with everyone else. Good to see some work being done in the fiscal office and getting things up to where they should be and getting, staffing to where it needs to be to complete the work that needs to be done.
Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
Sure. Give me just a second. I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve the purchase request 10368 to Business Furniture for office furniture for 4 areas of the fiscal office in the amount of $6,097.14 and authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yeah.
Thank you, board.
Okay. Mr. Zaharia?
Just trustee reports.
We had a meeting at Miami, I'm not at, a virtual meeting with Miami Valley Regional Planning last week, Thursday. We had a short agenda, but we did have a quorum and everyone was able to call in and show their support. Some new tax amendments were made, nothing significant. And more so the MVRPC director, Mr. Martin, told us about the COVID-19 work that they've been doing and the meetings that they've had. That's all I have to report. Since there's not a lot of meetings that people are going to, are there any other meetings on the list of trustees that someone needs to report about instead of going through each one?
Board, I'll just point out that the last TAC meeting was canceled, but the next one I believe is going to be virtual. Other than that, I don't have anything to report.
On Greene County Regional Planning, the meeting will be virtual on the 28th. So if we can pass that along to Mr. Grogan and to Max, and we'll get them, make sure they have logins if they want to tap in. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the email.
From an investment oversight committee, we've implemented now. We approved. Now it's a matter of implementation. So I would just suggest that committee maybe we convene in about 90 days just to make sure we've achieved everything that we set out to achieve and that everything's rolling as planned.
It's a good idea.
I would agree.
Other than that, I had just a couple of questions for Ms. Frick, or one
Yes.
for Ms. Frick. So if there's a situation where the three trustees or we need to sign something, are we authorized by the state or through a high revised code to sign through DocuSign or any electronic verification software? We can, you can sign contracts illegally binding through DocuSign. So that's why I'm curious if we have the ability to do that.
You know, Tom or Mr. Kress, I haven't seen anything discussing, you know, whether you can or can't, to be quite frank. You know, like you said, it's people use it for the signing of contracts, so I don't know that it would necessarily be problematic. But I haven't honestly looked at that. I mean, I can if you want, but I don't know the answer to that completely.
Yeah, I know for Mr. Rushing's sake, as we go into this time of year is when we typically get a stack of about 300 purchase orders to sign. And so the question being, as he rolls the year and opens up the new system and loads all those blankets and loads everything out, he needs at least 2 signatures. And so they right now they have to be wet signatures. So the question was if there's a way that those could be queued up and we could simply DocuSign.
Well, in regards to the software, the answer is no. You'll be able to do that remotely through the new VIP software.
Okay. And that's an acceptable signature for the state?
Correct, because it keeps track of who logged. You're only
So
trustee or fiscal officer will be able to have access to that and make the appropriate signatures. For example, I couldn't, in the system, I could see it, that there may be something pending for the fiscal officer, but I cannot approve it. So only Mr. Rushing will have that ability.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a work through. So, good. The only other question I had was relative to Morgan Stanley, and that was, and it's possible we're in COVID-19 time right now. So as far as people's response or getting back to us, but if we run into an issue, I guess this is more for Mr. Rushing. Have we initiated the transfer process for the paper that we have at Morgan Stanley to Huntington, or that's what you're trying to get a response on?
Correct. I did reach out to our point of contact at Morgan Stanley. Have not had a.
You're breaking up, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I lost Mr. Rushing's Video froze and voice.
I think Mr. Zaharia is working on something now.
Yep,
Zaharia,
yeah, he's frozen.
oh, okay.
I think it looks like he's trying to join. There he is.
I apologize, my system just crashed there. But we are starting the conversation with our new depository as well as James Investment. But in order to actually transfer that to our new depository as the custodial account under the management of James Investment, we will need the collaboration and approvals from Morgan Stanley.
Mr. Rushing, I don't know Huntington's practice, but I know in my personal life, when I've done this before, where I've transferred assets from one fiduciary or custodial to a different custodial, I initiate the process with the new custodial, and then they essentially initiate that through SEC to Morgan Stanley. So are we trying to initiate it with Morgan Stanley, or are we initiating it with Huntington? Obviously, Morgan Stanley essentially would normally just get notified by Huntington that they want to pull the paper over. Then Morgan Stanley would have to release that.
We have not started that. We are working through the paperwork right now to do that. My initial contact was more just as a courtesy to Morgan Stanley. But you provide a good point of knowledge to me, so I can start that with Huntington. If it comes to that, we don't get a response from Morgan Stanley.
And it can take 30 days to 60 days for some of those to move over, just FYI. It's not an overnight type process. So at least in my historical reference, when you move a portfolio.
Sure. Thank you for that.
Yep, no problem. So my whole point of it was that you may try to do the courtesy FYI in parallel, but you should be able to start that process through Huntington, and it's going to take time anyway. So.
Okay, very good point.
Okay. That's it. Other than I'd like to personally thank, is the chief there still?
He's still on, yes.
Yes, sir.
Chief, just a personal thank you to your crews that made a visit to my home the other evening. So they were responsive.
Our service.
Yeah, I prefer delivery, but not pick up. So, but they did a heck of a job, and so personal appreciation for that. So they were professional. They did everything they needed to do, and appreciative. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to hear, and I'll pass that on to them. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Board, the only issue we're having a little technical issue for the public comment portion, so we're not going to be able to do that. I apologize to the community, but if they want to email anything, we'll make sure that we get into the record the next meeting, and then we're going to work on that before our next public hearing at 6:30.
Ms. Wallace, we're going to adjourn this meeting though and open a new meeting, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a totally separate meeting. What we're going to do for here on out, that the meetings are at 5 o'clock, is we'll probably put the public hearings at the end of the agenda. So we'll do our regular meeting and then have our public meeting as a part of our regular meeting. So that'll be much easier to schedule. So most likely if we were asking for a request today for a public hearing, it would be on the next agenda, and then we would advertise it. Public hearing will be held as a part of the regular agenda on April 27th. So it'll be a modification, and we're still talking internally whether we want to start it right at 5 or put it at the end. We'll work through that.
Okay.
Great. Any other discussion? Hearing no other comments, I would request a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Trustee Kretz,
Yes.
Trustee Dean,
Yes.
Trustee Wallace.
Yes.